Here we go, episode 199 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, recapping Lake Fork and previewing the Sabine River. What a tournament we just finished at Lake Fork. I'm Ronnie Moore, your host today, co-host like usual, on the road, traveling in the car cam, Jessie. Kyle, let's just jump straight into Lake Fork reaction, man. 127 pounds, 8 ounces for Tucker Smith. Did not break the all-time weight record. Paul Elias 132.8. That still stands. So it's almost like a yearly deal. Well, let's turn the calendar. You have avoided it this year, Paul. We'll wait to see if 2026 what the calendar schedule looks like. I don't believe any events the rest of the year will break it, and so that record is safe for one more year. 127 pounds, 8 ounces is what Tucker Smith caught and weighed for the 4 days at Lake Fork, beating his roommate and I guess getting a little bit of revenge from Lake Hartwell, Paul Marks. They were 1-2 at Lake Hartwell with Paul beating Tucker. Whoa, there goes the phone. And then this week it was 1-2 with Tucker beating Paul. So Kyle, first thoughts that you have from being at the event and seeing the spectacle that we call Lake Fork.
Yeah, first thoughts are that, me being in a car trying to do this from my phone, we're going to see how this goes. That's got to be my first thought.
You got to get
Uh,
pulled over, Logan. You got to speed. We got to get you pulled over on the podcast so we can say that we're shooting one live.
yeah, so Logan Crumbly, driving the car right now. I am sitting in the passenger seat. Yeah, traveling back to back, that's kind of part of it. So had to shoot it when we can. But as far as the tournament's concerned, I mean, what an awesome tournament from the standpoint of mixture of different things. Obviously, forward-facing sonar played a big role. I mean, there's no hiding that, of course. But the story of Tucker and Paul not only battling it out for Dakota Lithium Rookie of the Year, but obviously that being the number one and number two finishers at Lake Hartwell just 2 weeks before, and then just the reverse. You have to think those two as such good friends and roommates on the road. Like, what a cool experience for both of those guys. For Paul to win there at Hartwell, and then Tucker there at Lake Fork. So very very cool story there. Certainly a very young top 10, very similar to what we saw last year at Lake Fork. So that's another thing, but I just think it was a really cool tournament. I mean, the weights were awesome. Every single day there was a new dynamic. Whether you were catching the early morning, some guys were calling it a shad spawn. Some guys were catching them on a shad spawn, like Seth Fighter and some of the guys fishing shallow. Even heard guys like JT Tompkins and Trey McKinney catching them at the top of treetops, shad spawn type deal. To the bite windows every day were so crucial because we saw it the last day with Paul Marks. That was the only day he wasn't able to capitalize on that super early morning bite, and that kind of cost him. Granted, he had a great day the final day as well, but he had to grind for it. And same way with Koya. His days were pretty steady each day, but that last day, just getting off to a really slow start, put him behind the eight ball. Especially when Tucker Smith and some other guys were having really great mornings. So just an entertaining tournament. I really enjoyed watching it. Um, you know, you always go to Lake Fork expecting the weights to be high and everything to show out, but given the time of year, before the tournament even started, most guys were talking about the lake kind of being in limbo. The water being high, still a ton of fish up spawning up shallow. A lot of them still moved off, offshore. The shad spawn, similar to what we saw with Brandon Cobb in 2019, wasn't really, much of a factor because of that high water. That's not my opinion. Lee Livesey told me that would be the case before the tournament even started. So, but for the weights to show out the way they did, in that, if you want to call it a limbo period, which is crazy to say just based on how well it fished, but certainly fish doing all sorts of things. And for it to be a not free spawn event and the weights to be like that was really, really cool.
Yeah, if you think about it, so of course, nowadays, like the honest truth of it is you have to be good at a lot of things, but you have to be great at certain things to excel. And if you're going to be a shallow water exclusive angler and not factor in forward facing in your deal, you have to be a top five jig flipper. You have to be a top five sight fisherman in terms of doing so. You see Drew Cook really show out big time at like Hartwell sight fishing. Some other guys rode the backs of, one big fish or things like that to stay in the top 10 there. but you have to be the best. That gone are the days, it seems, where you can be a middle of the road jig fisherman and get by. Like you have to be the best and an expert at certain things. And we saw Seth Feider be exceptionally well at the shad spawn, swim jig type fishing that we mentioned here on the podcast before the tournament. So it was great to see that actually play out completely, to fruition. Also caught some sight fishing and things like that. And then you look down, and yes, the top 10 dominated by forward facing sonar off the bank with the dam being open at Fork and a place that normally doesn't generate water flow. Having that water moving and that water on the lake falling somewhat during the tournament, hurting that shallow bite, it barely held back those hard charging shallow water anglers. Greg Hackney with 30, he had 21.6, 25.6. They finally shut the gates, 30 and a half pounds. You got the guys like Brandon Lester, 29, 22, 23. You've got some of those other guys like Brian New, 31 pounds. The Johnstons having big days as well. Caleb Summerall with 27. You have to look down through here. Jason Christie with nothing but 20s to 24s. You have to look down there and see the recipe for there was a great shallow bite. Was it winning? You have to be perfect if you're going to be fishing shallow and hope to get in the top five in some of these events when there are so many big ones in a much more stable zone offshore. And so we see that last week. We saw that. You had a lot of guys doing the offshore deal. Timber, when there's timber on a lake, that's going to be a factor. But it was good to see Fighter, Hackney, Lester, New, Summerall. I don't know if the Johnstons were doing it. It looked like one photo of Chris Johnston. He was at least fishing shallow. Brad Watley, Jason Christie, some of these guys that you expect to be fishing shallow and were fishing shallow, they were in the top 20. Basically, the top 10 was a bunch of forward-facing sonar experts, the best of the best at that. And then the 10 anglers that were not doing that were the best of the best. Seth Fighters, Greg, like we mentioned. So it's not just lucking into I got on a good shallow deal and ended up making it work. You have to be on your game if you're going to do that. And we saw some of the best on both sides of the spectrum show up in the top 20 for the tournament. And so great week overall. We had 5 anglers this year break 120 pounds, whereas last year at Fork, we only had 4 anglers break 120 pounds. Tucker Smith moves into 7th on the all-time weight list. Paul Marks moves into 8th. Trey McKinney, who won last year and is 4th all-time weight-wise, him and Kiyoya Fujita finished 3rd and 4th, and they really were held back from winning this tournament, Kyle, because of lowly 21-pound days. Trey on day 3 had 21, Kiyoya on day 4 had 21. That's all you need to say about a body of water. When 21 is perceived as a terrible day of fishing, you know that place has got them and that they were biting this week.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, we made the comment a handful of times during the live cast show that, you know, Trey's day 3 was going to haunt him so much just because he had such an amazing day the final day. I mean, what he was able to do, obviously Tucker Smith winning the tournament was the story, but what Trey McKinney did on that final day was, by the end of it was what you were halfway watching for just because you
Unbelievable.
thought he'd get to a certain point where he just couldn't cull up, and he just kept doing it, and found those wads of fish and were able to get them fired up multiple different times, multiple different groups of fish. So that was really fun to watch. And yeah, the more that day went along, you just felt horrible for him for the sake of having such a poor day 3 relative to the other 3 days he had. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it sounds crazy to say, but unless you were pacing basically 30 plus pounds a day, I mean, you didn't really have a great shot to win. So like you said, a 21-pound day puts you, in the big scheme of things, pretty far behind, from having a chance to win on that final day. So, impressive what those guys did. Like I said, Trey McKinney's final day was great. It was very, you know, unexpected, I guess, to see Kyoya struggle as much as he did the final day. I know the wind affected his spot. That's kind of the same way Paul Marks was on the final day as well. But you just expected throughout the day, you just expected he was going to find a group of fish and catch them in a hurry like he'd done, some of the previous days. Because a lot of his bigger fish and a lot of his damage was done the previous 3 days, just kind of in the middle part of the day. Even the later part of the day. which was unusual compared to a handful of other guys inside the top 10. So you just expected that it was going to come for him. It never did. And Tucker Smith got his first Elite Series victory. Very, very cool.
It's the same thing, and you know we mentioned the heat. You know, you get heat because you're asking about, is Drew Cook going to catch another clutch bedfish at the end of the day of day 4 like he did day 3 and day 2 and day 1 at Hartwell? And I said, no, you're just bound to run out of that fortune of getting a cooperating fish. Same thing for Kyoya. At the last hour of every day, he caught a better than average. And when we're saying average, that's a 6.5 pounder, something in the 7 plus 8 pound and a 9 pound range is stuff he caught in the final hour of each day. And it was just getting down there time wise. And you're like, it can happen quick, but are you going to be clutch 4 days in a row? It's so hard to do. My Denver Nuggets play basketball that way. Are we going to execute perfectly in the final 2 minutes again to sneak away with a win? And it's like sometimes it just doesn't work out, and you need that clutch factor, and it just didn't happen on the day 4. Like we saw Hartwell with Cook on that final day. It was just you were waiting for that clutch moment, and it just wasn't going to happen. It does show craziness when I put up a graphic that said the fish that you would need if you didn't make any other calls, you just made one call, one fish to get to the winning mark that you need. And Trey McKinney needed a 12.5 pounder on the final day to cull up enough to do it because he had a 7 something was his smallest, and he needed a 5 pound upgrade to win the tournament. And he would have had to catch a 12 pounder. And what's crazy was we paused and said, well, we are at Lake Fork. You just maybe, maybe that could happen. And so it was amazing. 38 pounds. And honestly, we hope for that. When you think of Kyoya having a 5 pound lead going in the final day and ever so great at what he does, and then there was a 3 pound gap from Paul to Tucker, you want some chaos for the top 2 on the final day. And when everyone had multiple fish except for Fujita and Marks to start the day, and they both had one keeper, I think first, second, third, and fourth. Yeah, you had Tucker had his one swim jig fish. Kyoya, Paul, and JT all had one fish. And so everyone in the top 10 had multiple fish, maybe a limit, and the top 4 only had one each. And you're like, this is what we wanted. We are on FS1 for 3 hours, and then we are on big national Fox for 3 hours. We don't want this thing to be over. And so you're kind of rooting for stuff to happen we hadn't seen all week. And you have some guys come from down in the pack getting big days early, century clubs for everyone. I think Fighter got up to 99 and change, and then it took him the longest. It took him like an hour to get to 99 and change, and it took him 3 hours to get to 100, and so we were waiting for those things all day, and it was multiple races. We mentioned everyone had 1, 2, or 3 goals. One goal, break the Century Club. 2 goals, break the Century Club and win the tournament. Third goal, if I have to break the all-time record to win the tournament, let's do that too. And so there was kind of multiple goals everyone was shooting for, and to have Trey have that amazing day, knowing he probably wasn't going to win because everyone was slowly catching up to him, and to have Tucker go on the flurries he went. It was very, very good TV. Honestly, some of the best Bassmaster Live that I've ever been a part of in my 7 plus 8 seasons of broadcasting with the crew. Yesterday's final day was incredible. Kudos to Paul Marks. 4 straight days of 30 pounds, the only angler to do that. He was so consistent. 30-13, 31-10, 33-4, and 31 even. But those are low 30-pound bags. And that's not to wave a stick at it. But Tucker Smith had 25, and then he had 34, 33, 34. And it just worked out that he was 1 pound heavier. Question before we move on, because Davey Hyde asked you this, and I just want, do we think later, hindsight, however long it took, 30 minutes of time, an hour, day 3, Paul Marks gets a pizza. We have fun with it. It's cool. I didn't mind it at all. But to lose by 11 ounces and to also start his final day as slow as he did, I don't think it was lingering in his mind. But do you think that looking back, you're like, man, I wish I had another hour to figure something out or find another spot? Do you think there's any kind of a regret from him or a hindsight from us?
I think there's probably a regret on his part only because he's probably tired of hearing about it, if I had to guess. That's how I would be about it. I mean, I understand it. I mean, if obviously my thoughts at the moment were like I thought it was very unusual, um, but you understood it from the standpoint of like how he obviously had done so much of his damage in the early parts of the day,
You felt
and
tapped out.
you and I talked about it that afternoon. It's like it's not like he just stopped fishing. It's not like he had a pizza party for like the duration of the rest of the day. I mean, that's just not what happened. I mean, obviously he went back out there and kept fishing, and even cold up
Yeah.
later in the afternoon. So I mean, it's not like he didn't fish hard. I mean, sure, I'm sure in hindsight for him, he probably wishes he would have had the extra, let's just say 20 minutes it might have taken to get to pizza. But like, I don't know. I don't. I hope he doesn't like have a big weight on his shoulders from it because I mean, there's nothing wrong with finishing first 2 weeks before and then second at Lake Fork, ultimately to your one of your best friends and travel roommates. So I hope he doesn't have any massive regrets because again you know did an incredible job. But the optics of it, the way I put it to Dave Mercer when we were talking about it in the media trailer, is like the optics of it are way worse than the reality of it. Like that's because getting pizza, like doing that in the middle of a tournament day, it has like a direct, connection to like winning or to, a final day where you're just blowing out the field. That was just an unusual circumstance because that's not that wasn't the case then. But the 15, 20 minutes he lost, sure. I mean, he probably wishes he wouldn't have done it again because he's probably tired of talking about it and tired of hearing about it. But I don't think getting pizza is what cost him the tournament. I think it was the
Yeah.
fact that he never had, like you said, one of those 30 5 pound giant days. Which again, you can't even say that out loud because it's like, what do you even call a giant day at Lake Fork? I mean, like you said, a low 30-pound bag's like still great. I mean, it's
30
amazing,
by
but
8:45 and 30 by 9:15, and you're like,
yeah,
what do I do the rest of the day? And we will say a special spot. We saw Ben Milliken day one pull up there, and Paul was right there. I saw Gussie in the background on the bank. Tucker Smith obviously wasn't too far from there either. What a magical morning spot that was because it seemed obviously Ben had 4 for 21 on the first day, lost to Giants. I say Giants for a day one and a limit starting fish, catch of a 5+ pounder, so you lose two 5+ pounders and you already have 4 for 21 at that point. And then Paul was right there and Ben was talking to him and was like, Paul is waxing us. And so for all those folks at home or a fan of certain anglers that think that everyone's out to get them, that was a situation where multiple people pull up on a spot and it's a general area, not a one cast spot. And and Ben even said on live, getting our butts kicked by Paul because he was fishing so well and catching so many and so many big ones, that it just didn't work out for other anglers. And so Paul ended up using that spot, and what a good morning spot that was. Incredible. Tucker was there as well. I thought Tucker's pivot, he had a slow day 3 in the morning for 2 hours, didn't really catch much. And so to see him on day 4 pivot and go shad spawn fishing with a swim jig for a few minutes and catch a 6 pounder, a bonus one to kind of get settled in, huge for his morning. So, Kyle, anything else about Lake Fork that we can echo? Obviously, I've got numbers, but yesterday was Mother's Day, and to be honest, as soon as the weigh-in's done, I got the content done, went home and spent the time with the girls and the wife, and now we're shooting the podcast. So there'll be more numbers to break down for the 200th version of the Inside Bassmaster podcast in our next episode. Kyle, we have a scene change. You have made it to your location, and it's time to change scenes to our next location, the Sabine River. Any thoughts on that? We know the place. It's drastically going to be different from Fork weights wise, but it always provides dramatic moments, especially coming down to the wire. Somewhere in that 43 to 50 pound range, probably for a winning weight. If it's more than 50, let's go. If it's less than 43, that's a record for the lowest weight. So either way, but we've seen a bunch of fish get caught lately there in our tournaments, And from the reports that I've heard, they haven't had any substantial storms to distribute the population or hurt with a fish kill like hurricanes and things like that. So Sabine should be a, fish catching, interesting play out. And for the old school non forward facing sonar fans, enjoy. Here's your week.
Yeah, I would say that I think a lot of people, you and I have talked about this on the podcast in the past, but I think a lot of people just give the Sabine River such a bad reputation because the weights are not great. Uh, Everything else it gives you as far as storylines is concerned is one of the best venues we go to. Not only just because of the fans and the just absolute party that comes out every single time we come to Orange, Texas, but do you make a long run? Do you stay short? We know there's obviously a lot of good areas close by the takeoff. But obviously making long runs has paid off big time in the past for anglers. It's the fact that like it's so hard to distance yourself from the rest of the field too. So like every bite is so crucial. There's just not a great population of 3.5+ pound fish. So I mean, like when you get one of those bites, you have to capitalize on it. And all those things tie together and make it one of the more interesting places we go to. And like you said, it's just from the standpoint of like fun styles of fishing. I mean, it's usually a frog, a spinnerbait, flipping of some sort, chatterbait, top water. Obviously, we saw a popper and things play, a year ago or 2 years ago. It's just a very, very unique tournament location. And, from what I understand is that the water is high. There's some things going on down there, obviously, with the rains we've had. So that's always going to be something you want to keep an eye on. It's going to be interesting to hear reports from practice, just to kind of see how things are going. Obviously, it's always bad, bad, bad. When we go down there, obviously the reports from practice are seemingly. So it's always interesting to hear from the guys, once they complete practice. And like I said, one way or another, it always ends up being a very entertaining tournament.
Like my buddy said the other day to me talking about basketball, he said even bad basketball teams have a leading score. So even low weight Bassmaster tournaments will have a winner. So it does not matter how we get it done. If they want to put a tournament on in a mud puddle and there are bass in there, let's have a tournament. And yeah, it'll be interesting because of how big. So the first off, the Sabine River flows from Fork all the way down through Toledo Bend and then out into the Sabine River before it hits the Gulf and the ocean and things like that. And so, uh, very narrow river, dirty mud banks up north, and so the water that gets released out of Toledo Bend, which is one of the largest fisheries in the South, into one of the narrowest funnels as it lets go, it has the opportunity to flood and be crazy up there. We remember Jason Christie. We've seen other anglers go up there in the past and do well. High water means strong, strong current up there, and it means harder to travel farther because that drag on your boat means you can't go as far as fast probably, and there's no gas. So no gas up north, and you're gonna have to be pushing it to make it as far as you want to go. So we'll keep an eye on that north of takeoff. But like you said, vast fishery. We can go all the way to Houston in the past, things like that. Multiple bios. You got Taylor's. You've got the uh, Beaufort, I think, or is it Beaumont? It might be Beaumont. Um, I'm trying to look at the. I'm gonna pull it up on my phone because it's faster. But yeah, all those little areas. We just refer to them by the town that it's near. Orange, Texas. Um, yeah, you've got Orange there by takeoff. You got Sabine Lake. You have Taylor's. You have Beaumont, like I was talking about. You can go down in the intercoastal to head towards Galveston Bay and all that stuff. Or you can go north, um, like we've seen in the past. So, going to be a interesting tournament. Numbers, not a bunch of quality at times, but we do know the impact, the ability for a 4 pounder to seem like a Lake Fork 10 pounder type of deal. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a absolute monster game changer. Texas only still for the fishery. Water wise, you can't fish in Louisiana. I think though, Kyle, there is a distinction. As long as you're on the main river, you can fish Louisiana. Is that correct?
That's the way I understand it. Yeah.
Like across from Takeoff is technically Louisiana because it splits the river down the middle. But if it's on the main drag, you can fish on both sides of the river. You cannot go off of the main river in Louisiana unless you're navigating specifically for safe travel. And so that's one thing. Like, if you're trying to drive around Sabine Lake, and for some reason you don't want to take the Texas side, you can drive through the Louisiana side. You just cannot fish the Louisiana side of Sabine Lake and all of those canals and cut throughs on the Louisiana side. So, normal Sabine that we've seen in the past, we've had winners like Jason Christie, Greg Hackney, Brock Mosley that are all in our field. The other two winners we've had at the Sabine, Chris Lane and Todd Faircloth, not in our field, but we remember those events vividly. Faircloth won in Louisiana. Which is not in play, obviously. Chris Lane won in Texas, and it was an absolute pour down that tournament.
One of those little
And
water drain, basically like the
yeah,
culvert drains
the
underneath
dead
the
end
water. Yeah.
canals there, um, around Taylor's, and then Hackney just north of Orange, Christie much farther north of Orange, and Mosley just around Orange, and had spent some other time in a couple of areas too. So, anything else about the Sabine before we jump into fantasy picks, and then we'll let you go after we do that.
I got nothing. No, I'm looking forward to it. Again, I always look forward to this tournament, especially being at because it's just very entertaining to cover, to watch on the water, from the years I've done that. And then, of course, the style of fishing is always fun. And yeah, it always comes down to the wire. So, I mean, you can't complain about that.
If you are in attendance this week and you're an Orange Lake local or an Orange, Texas local, Sabine River angler, and you want to check it out, the crew will be down there. Tommy, Davey, Mercer, Kyle. I am staying here, frankly, because I wanted to spend the evenings with my daughters and my wife. So that's the stage of life I'm in, and I just wanted to be here with them. And it also gives us a safeguard here, me being in studio, hanging out, that if something were to happen, cameras wise or live show connection wise to the venue, we can still continue to do Bassmaster Live here. You would never want to do that in the middle of an FS1 show and have something bad happen. So safekeeping, I will be here, but yeah, Tommy, Davey are going to head out Wednesday, and they will be there for the week. You and the rest of the folks, like always, will be there on site. So join the outdoor tailgate, which it should be a time. Let's jump into. Let's do TH Marine Pick'em first off the rip, because that is 7 questions, this angler or that angler, and you choose them, and then you roll the dice on that. It is a 50-50. And last week, Kyle, I believe I went 4-3. It was my worst week, but I moved up to 95% from 93%. So last week really threw a curveball to some people because I did worse than I normally do and improved. So let's talk TH Marine Pick'em.
I'm just now realizing because this is just the day after Lake Fork that I did horribly at Lake Fork. Only got 2 right of the 7, which is just unbelievably bad.
Pulling away,
But
baby, pulling
doesn't
away. What are you at,
doesn't
23?
doesn't matter.
Or
24.
24? Okay, I'm at 27.
So yeah, so let's move on to this week. Obviously the Sabine River matchup number 1. We're going to go with 2 previous champions at the Sabine River. Jason Christie versus Brock Mosley. Who you got?
I've got Christie, but I do have a warning to folks who go on that Christie because of a past winner. So has Brock Mosley, and Brock's never been worse than like 13th. So just be careful. So I am taking a risk, picking Christie, confidence there, but that could be the overwhelming percentage picking him. But Brock being the most recent winner, he's got such a great track record. If people don't go with consensus, Jason Christie, I'm trying to gain some points back there if Christie beats Brock this week.
Yeah, I am going to go Brock Mosley. So I think you can obviously justify either. Hence the reason the matchups are always like this. I say that every single time. It is such a toss up, but just to be different, and because I need to do something different to catch up to you, evidently, I'm going Brock Mosley. So matchup number 2 has been a reoccurring matchup this year so far. Top two in AOY, Jay Securit versus Will Davis Jr. Where are you going on that one?
I actually have Will Davis Jr. and I also have him on Drain the Lake that I picked before the season. So feels applicable to stick with both this week, and that's nothing against Jay. I felt like Will would be good at this fishery. Did not realize he would be in the top two in AOY at this point in the season. So it's kind of coming to a head where maybe this is a catch-up tournament because Jay is a little worried, he said on stage yesterday, about the Sabine. So we will see.
So I do like Jay Securit to have a good tournament. He's actually on my Rapala team, but I am going Will Davis Jr. Um, in the pick'em, which seems crazy because they're both in the same bucket in Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing. But we'll get to that when we get to it.
Yeah.
Matchup number three, aluminum rig wrangle. Couple guys fishing out of aluminum boats. We've got Bill Owen and John Cox. Who you got?
Bill's been great here, but I got John Cox this time. John hasn't really done swell at the Sabine that you would expect with aluminum boats taking wins and high victories in this tournament. I expect maybe this is the time that it shines for John Cox.
I'm going Bill Lowen. I think he's on a roll this year, top 10 in AOI. I like his chances to have another successful event there at Sabine River. And the matchup number four, Flippers Delight, Greg Hackney and Seth Fighter. Who we got?
I know you're going to differ from me here probably, but I got Seth Fighter.
You're right. I got Greg Hackney. Matchup number five, roommate matchup or top two in Dakota Lithium Rookie of the Year. I can't speak, blah, blah, blah. Or top two in the last two tournaments, whatever you want to call the matchup. It is Paul Marks versus Tucker Smith. Who you got?
Let's say it on three, just so you can't be different. I want to see who you have. So ready? One, two, three. Tucker
Tucker
Smith.
Smith.
Okay, good, good. We matched Tucker Smith. I don't need you trying to finagle it over here. But yeah, I got Tucker.
I can change my picks to whoever I want. So, frankly, it doesn't matter.
It's a
Both going
binding
Smith
contract on
there.
the podcast, just so we know for the record.
I think when you look at Tucker, obviously spent so much time on the Coosa River, he is very, very good fishing shallow as well. And I'm sure Paul is as well. I think again, both those guys have been very, very consistent. But I'm going Tucker Smith. Matchup number six. I want to explain this one. Social media showdown. Uh,
Don't need to
that's not
explain it there. There it is.
that's not meant to be a negative thing, a derogatory by any means. It's just two guys that have big followings, is all it is. Ben Milliken, Mike Iaconelli. Um, I literally looked over that this morning and I was like, I hope nobody thinks that's like a negative thing. It's just two guys that have a big following. Literally is the rationale for that one. Two very popular guys, which makes it hard to pick because they both got such big fan bases. That's why they're matched up against each other. So just getting that out there, it's not meant to be a negative thing. They both just have big followings. So Ben Milliken, Mike Iaconelli, who you going with?
I've got Ike actually.
I also have Ike on that one.
I
And
don't
then
think he's going to drive up in the woods this time. He did that one time at the Sabine, but I do think that um, for Ike, just being completely 100% honest here with the folks on the pod, Ike fishes better when he's happy, and Ike is not happy using forward-facing sonar in 2025. Just absolutely truthful on that. He hates it, doesn't like it, doesn't want to do it. So the fact that it's not going to necessarily be in most anglers' game plans to begin with, I feel like Ike's going to be happy all ready to start the tournament, and he'll fish much better. And he already understands what he's expecting, at the Sabine. And so I just expect a happier Ike, which means a more successful Ike sometimes.
all right, and matchup number seven, looking for redemption. Lee Livesey, Stetson Blaylock, a couple of guys that we really expected to have great events at Fork, did not. Let's see who has the redemption, if not both of them. So matchup number seven, Livesey, Blaylock, who you got?
I think I'm trying to gain some on some folks. I want to get closer to 100%. I think I'm going to go Blaylock because I expect, man, if Lee didn't catch him at Fork, he's going to catch him at Sabine. He's got a lot of good history here too. So I think that Stetson's going to be the least picked angler out of these seven matchups. If you could look at the percentage picked, I guarantee you Stetson will be the least picked angler in any of these matchups. And so give me that for a little bit of comeback pointage.
I'm going Lee Livesey. So yeah, that's where I'm going on that. That
So
is
do
your
we
H Marine Bassmaster Pick'em Challenge.
so we differ on Livesey, Blaylock, Hackney Fighter, Lowen Cox, and Christy Mosley.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Kyle, while we change gears to Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing, let's talk about how did you like the backpack? You may not have it on hand now, but the Yeti Ranchero backpack, I'm going to get your feedback on it after using it around the water, on the water at the event last week. As I give a rundown of this new Yeti Ranchero backpack, it is the brand new backpack to join the Yeti's lineup of tough as nails bags. No more digging through your backpack. Cutting edge rip zip opening lets you quickly tear the bag open to see the stuff you need inside there in seconds. And for even more convenience, a vertical zipper allows you to grab gear without having to go all the way to the bottom if you did not pack it correctly when you left the house. Check out Yeti.com or a Yeti retail store there for the Yeti Ranchero backpack. So, 1 week torture test. I hope you didn't torture it too bad, and that's why it's not with you right now. So, how did it go with your camera, your gear, your notepads, your laptop, everything for flying on a road trip to Fork?
Yeah, so it's in the car. There's nothing wrong with it. Just didn't grab
Good.
it on the way up here.
Good.
But it was very good. And the feature about the zipper at the bottom, you think, well, how much would you use that? I actually used it a lot because I used that basic, main pocket for just a variety of different things, basically like car chargers, like USB-C, cords, things like that. And there were a couple different times where I had it packed to the brim, even like shirts and like different things, bring it to the venue to wear on set. So rather than digging through everything, use the bottom compartment. It was very nice. I like the backpack a lot and look forward to taking it on to the Sabine and the rest of the season.
If I was still in high school or college, it might be the backpack of choice because if my mechanical pencils fell to the bottom of my backpack one more time, I was going to drop out of school. I was about tired of having to dig to the bottom of the bag. So, awesome. Well, look forward to talking more about that and after your Sabine River torture test for episode 200 next episode. So, time for Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing. 5 buckets, and boy, talk about torture test last week. Torture for Ron Dog at Lake Fork. So, just to give you a rundown, I had some Coosa River guys, some swim jig guys, some shallow water guys, and some big bait guys. And so I fully expected, I connected the dots on one big time. Seth Fighter, Bucket A, 10th place, and Lee Livesey was the high 50% choice in Bucket A, and he got 90th. Sorry, I'm getting choked up here. I got 10th place and Lee, the consensus favorite, 90th. So that was huge for my team to beat that many people. But then I gave it all back. If I told you that Kenta Kamira was last place on day one with 1 bass for 3 pounds, you should have saw how shocked I was. But then I was even more shocked day two when he catches 32 pounds to move to 65th and ends up being my second best angler in fantasy because Dakota Ebear, who was 6th on day one, he catches 1 bass, drops to the 70s. Scott Canterbury was in the 30s, drops to the 70s. And then David Gaston was already down in the 90s and stayed there. So literally Kenta goes from last place and gets 65th, and I thought I'm going to get a bunch of points today with him doing well. Well, I lost just as many by everyone else falling way down. So, brutal week. I dropped 10%. I'm down to 80% now instead of 90%. So, bounce back here at the Sabine. But how was Fork for you? I know you were happy when I was texting you my pain.
It was okay. It was somewhere in between. I had Brandon Polnick in 23rd, Easton Fothergill in 8th, and Greg Hackney in 11th. But I also had Lee Livesey and Stetson Blaylock, the two guys we were talking
Oh,
about looking for redemption. So
what is that,
90th,
90th and last?
90th and 100th. So
Oh,
certainly
100th.
not great events for those two guys, but the other three did pretty well. So kind of kept me middle of the road. Didn't drop me too much in percentages. I'm at 90.6 overall. So steady, not great, but not horrible either. Somewhere,
Wait, was it Drain the Lake or was it Rapala where you're like 50th?
It's Drain the Lake. I'm
Okay.
still doing fine in Drain the
Okay.
Lake.
I was about to say, you dropped from
Um,
50th to 90%. That's crazy.
yeah, that is Falcon Rod's Drain the Lake
Okay.
challenge is the one
So,
that I'm doing well.
um, my Rapala team, bucket A to E, I got Jake Whitaker, Brandon Polinick, Bo Browning, Cliff Pace, and Ed Lochran. Who's your lineup consist
I
of?
like it. I have Jay Shakirett, Wesley Gore, Kyle Welcher, you guessed it, Greg Hackney in bucket D, and Kenta Kamura in bucket E.
Okay. Um, you went with Jay Shakir in bucket A. That's more intriguing to me than my Whitaker pick. Basically, Whitaker's never missed the cut here. I think he's got a couple 41sts and an eighth or a fifth. No, he's got a fifth and two 41sts, and I think one of those 41st he was like 10th going into day three and fell to 41st. So he was like top 10 in two of the three tournaments if it got paused halfway through. So that's my justification. Grinder style. And after Whitaker finished last on his home lake of Hartwell, he turned around to 25th last week at Fork, got stayed in bucket A after a good event. And so I expect Whitaker to be good at the grinder type, wacky rig, frogging, some shallow flipping.
Yeah, so for me, Jay Security, until he proves he's not going to catch him, I'm just going to keep picking him in bucket A because I'm tired of saying that, he's a great pick for the sake of momentum and not picking him. It bit me at Lake Fork. Obviously, secured another top 10 finish. So I'm just going to go Jay Security in bucket A, similar to years past where I've just gone Patrick Walters until he doesn't catch him. I am just going to go with Jay Security until he does not catch him. So, no real other explanation other than like he's the hot hand right now, so that's where I'm gonna ride until he struggles.
I had Brandon Polinick in bucket B. Who did you have? Did you have Wes Logan?
Wesley Gore.
Or Wesley Gore? Okay. So for BP, man, I think that fisheries like this have been a little bit of a puzzling kryptonite, but I think that he is well aware of what he needs to do and will not overthink it, won't do anything crazy. And I think that he'll keep himself in the game. A lot of the times at the Sabine River, it's not that you didn't find him, it was that you went for the leading bag and came up, snake eyes. Um, and so I think that you can't win it on day one, but you can lose it by catching one or two bass. And so I think that Pollock's going to have a better, not that the game plans in the past have been bad, but I think he's going to just work his way into this tournament before trying to shake it up and make something happen. So I'm going BP in bucket B. Um, I think he had a decent Lake Fork, right? Let me
Made the
see.
cut. Yep, made the cut. Didn't have a
20,
great
23rd. Yeah. Okay.
didn't have a great third day, but yeah, great event for him, man.
Yeah. So I think that he's just a good mixture of young and old styles combined because this bucket is truly like it's a group of young guys with a few veterans sprinkled in like Porosnik, Schmidt, Polinick, Palmer, Mosley, Lester, Jordan Lee, and then the others, and Drew Benton, and the others are like relatively younger anglers. So give me Wesley Gore. And is it just because he boat flipped an 8 pounder on the fork? Is that why?
No, it's just the fact that he's again, like we talked about earlier with Will Davis Jr.'s Coosa River guy. Very good shallow water fisherman, and I think he's got the momentum. Obviously, it's back-to-back top tens after a rather slow start to the elite season. I like Wesley Gore to have another good finish there. There's a handful of other guys in that bucket, plenty of shallow water power fishermen that should have good events. Wes Logan was one of them that you did mention. But I'm going Wesley Gore just based on the momentum and because a few of the guys on my team are fairly high percentage. So that was probably the biggest risk from a percentage standpoint that I'm taking in Rapala.
You're going with Kyle Welcher, Mr. Sabine River, after multiple top tens there in his two times. And I'm going Bo Browning, offspring, spawn, as we'd call it in fishing, of the best river fisherman in the history of Bassmaster Elite Series river fishing tournaments um, or opens. And so, Bo, yeah, I think of the rookies, he's good with scope. He's good with forward facing sonar. But I think compared age wise to everyone else, age being equal, he may be the best close your eyes and catch them type of guy in our rookie field, in my opinion. I don't know if that made sense to you. Help explain that to the folks at home. I'm not discrediting anyone else, but I think the way he was raised and brought up and the training he got and the types of fisheries that he excelled on early in his career, like I feel that he would blend in really well with the Sabine River.
I think the way you explained it was perfect. I would say that he's very good with his electronics, uses them when he needs to, but also, I would say even still to this day, he prefers to not do that if he doesn't have to. Again, it's not to say that he's against it by any means. It's just like I think he has more confidence, just fishing shallow, fishing, that same style that you associate with Stephen Browning. I mean, he's very, very good at that too. So, yeah, I would agree with you 100%. For me, Kyle Welcher, between the back-to-back top tens at the Sabine River, and basically anytime you can just put your trolling motor down and go fish, I feel like Kyle Welcher is absolutely one of the best at that, if not the best. I mean, there's so many guys on the Elite Series that are good at that, but he's certainly one of the best. And you
Could he
mix
win
that,
another one near takeoff this year?
yeah, it could be. But I just think that he has obviously shown as much consistency as you possibly can in two Elite Series trips. But I will say, in that bucket, it is shocking that number one, neither of us picked, or that only 2.6% of players are picking John Cruz.
Yep.
Talk about a guy that's never finished worse than 28th at the Sabine River. I don't know why he's only at 2.6%. Like that's crazy. I don't even know why I didn't pick him, to be honest. I might honestly change, but I do like Kyle Welcher a lot in that tournament, despite the higher player percentage.
Yeah, Welcher being at 27.2. I kind of debated it because Bo's right there at the same percentage as Cruz, but with Christie and Welcher getting a lot of the eyeballs in this bucket, over 50% between those two. Hunter Shrikes had two really good finishes in a row in his times fishing it, and then some other guys to consider. Tyler Rivette may be on people's short lists as well. So yeah, Cruz might be we might see his player percentage jump after the podcast because we just kind of an epiphany there. Bucket D, two buckets left. I am going with someone in bucket D. I already said it. I don't know why I'm being mysterious. I'm picking someone that I haven't picked all year yet and has been quiet as a human being his whole life and quiet so far this year in the Elite Series, and that's Cliff Pace making his return to the Elite Series. Normally he's not one to be in front of the camera making a big shout or spout. He's done okay. He got 65th in Palatka, which isn't a bomb. 13th at Okeechobee. Then he had two bad ones at Pascatank and Hartwell, and then another just outside the cut in the 50s at Fork. So he finds himself in bucket D, which overall right now for the AOY standings, this would put Pace around, he's 70th on the dot. And so you can see, I guess, the formula to getting 70th. Andrew Loberg had two terrible finishes and then has had three great finishes in a row since then. And Cliff Pace had some decent finishes, middle of the road, and then two bad ones most recently, and then a middle of the road again. And it equals their back to back in the points race. So Cliff Pace, though, I think you want to talk about a balsa square bill expert, aficionado, creator, understander. That's him. And then flipping little top waters. This sounds like Cliff Pace.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually like that pick a lot. For me, I don't really need a whole lot of explanation. Greg Hackney, just incredibly good shallow water power fisherman. Obviously has a win here. Got a little bit of momentum at Lake Fork with an 11th place finish. Really good finish there for Greg. I like Hack Attack to have a big one here and then keep the momentum rolling. I think he just got off to a bad start, and we're going to see him turn it around the rest of the season. So I got Greg Hackney and D.
And we'll truly not know with Cliff Pace's 3 years of Elite Series events here what he is comfortable with because his two best finishes were in 2013 and 2015, which is early in the year starting the tournaments, like they were the February, March tournaments. And then he didn't do great in the June tournament that Hackney won. But we don't know if that was a no Louisiana in play and that's where he had made hay in the first two events or something, or the first event at least, or if it was because it was a move to the summer, June, and he was, in the train of thought of spring. Not sure. But this one
And
will
the
be like
the
2023's
Sabine
date
River,
range.
the Sabine River too. I mean, like it's such a fine line of having a really good tournament, and having a bad tournament, because there's so many guys that catch a small limit, but obviously catching one better than average size fish, or especially two, really propels you to having a top 10. So I mean, it is a fine line. Guys that have had one bad finish there, like Hackney's finished outside the cut one time. There's guys that have had success, like Swindle has always done extremely well at Sabine River, but he had one bad one. I mean, like it's a fine line from having a really good finish to a really bad finish. So um, you can't look too much into somebody having one bad finish at the Sabine River, because yeah, in the fine line of finishing 70th to finishing 30th is like one bite a lot of times. So
For sure.
uh, definitely two bites over 2 days. So yeah.
Well, when you think about Bucket E, you do have some big names in there, and there will be some guys before we get into who we picked. Obviously, Zaldane, popularity wise, Swindle, like you said, he's got a second in the past when Hackney won. Overall, pretty good fishing and finishes there, except for the most recent trip we had. Matt Robertson made a top 10 the last time we were at the Sabine River. You think about Chad Pipkins having some great moments at the Sabine. Kenta Kimura was in the top 10 last time we were here. Iaconelli's had some success here as well. Kennedy feels like he's been on camera multiple times at the Sabine. Mark Frazier, I don't know. His brother was great at the Sabine, and so they probably chatted way back in the day about it. And so you just never know how comfortable Mark will feel on the Sabine. Let me see. I think Mark's fished one time at the Sabine. It would have been 23. No, he's fished two times. He's got an 89th and a 26th. And so, yeah, it seems like you're due for a bad one. If you've been to the Sabine and never had a bad one, that every angler gets one bad one. You just don't know if it's the first time you go there or the third time you go there, but it's bound to happen. And so, Bucket E, I'm going with Ed Lochran, though. Just somebody different that I haven't picked this year that I feel would slow down enough. At times we fish way too fast at the Sabine. And he's been middle of the road and at the bottom. So this could be his breakout event. No real rhyme or reason other than that. I mean, Bucket E is just a hodgepodge mixture of confusion of why these guys are in Bucket E. Um, a lot of these guys have never finished a season in Bucket E, and so it's hard to understand who's going to get out off the schneid. And so I think Ed normally is a great post spawn angler, and so we'll see from this point in the season on how he does.
Like it. I'm going Kenta Kimura. I think the momentum from that final day he had at Fork, obviously rallying back. That's got to do something for you, give you some confidence. And like you mentioned, obviously had some success there the last time we were there. So Kenta Kimura, I like him to get out of Bucket E this week. No longer Bucket E.
Okay. Well, there's our Rapala Bassmaster fantasy fishing picks. Whitaker, Polinick, Browning, Pace, and Lochran for my team. Who's your five again?
Shakurit, Wesley Gore. I'm saying them off the top of my head. Wesley Gore, Kyle Welcher, Greg Hackney, and Kenta Kimura.
Okay, awesome. Let's get to Falcon Rods Drain the Lake. 8 anglers. You select them once and you lose them for the rest of the year. So you better pick them when they do well in a tournament. I think last week it was just, for the most part, ho hum. For me, I had dead last. That sucked. I had Livesey, Kenta, Dakota. Both of those were on my Rapala teams, and they did bad in Drain the Lake too, obviously. Taku did all right, 34th. Walters, 12th. That's solid. John Garrett, 48th. Chris Aldane, 49th. So I had four guys in the cut, two of them right at the bottom of it, and then I had, four guys below the cut, two of them basically bottom of it as well. So let's switch it up this week at the Sabine. My first four, I'll mention some anglers that we've talked about already for speed. I got Bo Browning, Kyle Welcher, Cliff Pace, and Will Davis Jr.
Yeah, I have lost my spot on my computer because I was reading an email, but I've got no, that's my team from last week. Let's see here. I have Gerald Swindle, Caleb Summerall, Brock Mosley, and Wesley Gore. My first four.
My final four, I've got Wes Logan, Logan Latuso, Mark Frazier, and Kyle Norsetter.
My last four: Brian New, Matty Wong, David Gaston, and Kenta Kimura. A couple of guys that I had on my Rapala team, also on my Drain the Lake team.
So we're just going to talk about those anglers that we have not previously mentioned so far. I talked about Browning. We've talked about Welcher, Cliff Pace. We've talked about Will Davis. We've talked about so Kyle Norsetter. Just feel like this is a shallow, grimy type deal. Norsetter seems to do well in some of these events. We will see how he gets used there. People might save him for the Mississippi River. Comes from a different part of the Wisconsin area, not necessarily a Mississippi River guy. So you see Wisconsin, you think about it. He is much closer to Milwaukee than he is to La Crosse, and so opposite end of the state or opposite side of the state. So I'm picking Norsetter here, and not saving him for the end of the year. Mark Frazier. We mentioned him briefly. For one, he's got the baby magic, the baby energy. We shot the podcast last week, and then I looked at social later that night, and they had a baby, their third one. So congrats to the Frazier family there. It is growing, and oh, what a deal it is to miss some practice at Fork, go in there flying the night before the tournament, and then have a pretty dang good tournament and catch 30 something pounds one of the days as well. So shout out to him. Baby needs, I'm not going to say new shoes, because in the Moore family, we're adamant about not putting shoes on a baby until they walk, because they don't need shoes until they walk. So baby doesn't need new shoes. Baby needs new diapers. So Mark's going to keep it going this week. Logan Latuso, you got that Cajun influence on the team. I've got Logan this week. Robbie Latuso, his dad, has always done well at this place as well. I think Logan also might have fished an open down here, but it seems like when you get Logan around Toledo, Rayburn, Sabine, uh, the Morgan City area for those tournaments, I think he shows up big. And then West Logan, he's your guy, one of your guys that always poor mouse on even a great fishery, but seemingly still somehow does well in the tough grinders. Like you wouldn't expect, if you're picking guys with good vibes and good energy, he's gonna not be happy with how his practice went at the Sabine. Don't let that deter you if you're thinking about picking Wes, because normally in these uh, grinded out, figured out type tournaments, he will survive. Part of the Coosa River gang as well. And so I am trying to block out any of the future West Logan sound bites of this place is terrible. Why am I here, when he's going to finish 18th later in the week?
Yeah, no, that he'll catch them. I think certainly very good shallow water power fisherman, and definitely used to a grinder style tournament based on his location in the world. So, for me, obviously Gerald Swindle we talked about has had a lot of success here. Very good shallow water, junk fisherman as he gets referred to a lot. Caleb Summerall, same way. Obviously a Louisiana guy, so had success there as well. Brock Mosley had a lot of success at the Sabine River. Kind of had him circled on my Drain the Lake for this one. Wesley Gore, obviously already described him for Rapala. Brian New, I think a guy that also is very good. Shallow water, top water, certain things that have played at the Sabine in the past. I think Brian New sets up well. Matty Wong obviously did really well there 2 years ago. I also just think, you look back to his history, he's just done well in these like shallow river style tournaments. When he qualified for the Elite Series at the Nation Championship, that was the style fishery it was. Just very old school in that regards. You see Matty Wong and you don't necessarily think old school guy, but I do think that is one of his strengths fishing wise. David Gaston, same kind of explanation we talked about with Wesley Gore, Alabama guy, very good shallow water, and Kenta Kimura already talked about it. So that's my Falcon Rods Drain the Lake Challenge.
Awesome. Well, we've got 4 days of coverage coming up for the Maxim Tire Bassmaster Elite, the sixth stop of the Bassmaster Elite Series season. We've just got 4 days at the Sabine, and we will only have Tenkiller, St. Clair, and the Mississippi River out of La Crosse, Wisconsin left on the Elite schedule. So think about that, Kyle. We will be May 18th. We'll have 3 events left through the middle of August. So you have one in mid-June, nothing in July, and then middle of August, we'll be done with the Elite season. So we've had a blast of a time getting through as many tournaments as we have. I think this will be our 7th, counting the Classic. And we are almost done with it. We're halfway through the opens already as well. So it's been a early spring for us. The alarm clock went off early in January, and we'll be through the season instead of July being the midpoint. May is the well past the midpoint. So a lot of front-ended schedule. We will see. We haven't quite decided on all the cameras yet, so I'm not going to give a partial list because things can still change. But it should be a mixture of young and old, and uh, who you'd like to, the style you'd like to see day one of a tournament to get a feeling of how it's going to play out. So we will see, just as a little tidbit there. All right. Well, Orange, Texas is going to be a party, a riot. If you've never been and you're nearby, show up and enjoy it. Go bother Kyle and tell him how you're beating him in fantasy. Kyle, talk to you at the end of the Sabine, and we'll talk to you every day on Bass Live.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. It's going to be an awesome week. And yeah, like you said, rolling right through the elite season.
Your hair's looking great.